The last two presidents have had a Ramadan Iftar dinner with Muslims every year to celebrate the end of Ramadan. Is that something you would do?
It wouldn't bother me. It wouldn't bother me. It's not something I've given a lot of thought to, but it wouldn't bother me.
Ramadan Kareem. Very important. Have a very blessed Ramadan. Thank you very much for being here. It's a great honor.
Look, you saw the president put out a statement very early on last month about Ramadan, and obviously respecting the religion and respecting the event.
But this year, those American Muslims who attended previous White House Ramadan events say they plan to decline if invited.
Well, an iftar dinner to mark the end of the daily fast during Ramadan at the White House was canceled last night.
Ramadan worship continues, even amid the rubble in Rafah, where over 1 million Gazans seek safety from Israel's military campaign.
Allahu Akbar.
In Washington, American Muslims prayed in front of the White House earlier this month. The mood was somber. Worshippers said the suffering in Gaza weighed heavily on them.
With Muslims.
Issa. Okay. Issa? Yes. Asa Galloway.
Issa Galloway defines the mission.
Kind of a show that will put people on the edge of their seat.
Because it leads to the future with a more sophisticated approach.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I have a fantastic topic for you today, but I want to start by kind of talking about one of the things that has been a huge pet peeve of mine, and that has been how our community kind of always waits until the very last minute to do anything. And this is especially true when it comes to advocacy. We see threats, we see issues coming miles and miles away, and then, we just put it on the back burner. We don't have sometimes organized and professional people doing advocacy for our community all the time. So with about 75 days, about 2.5 months till Ramadan comes, I want us to start considering Ramadan as a premier opportunity for our community to get empowered. And in fact, just like Ramadan itself, I got 29 to 30 ways that Ramadan can empower our community. Here's the first one. Guys, I'm going to tell you a quick story, but I'm going to give you the moral right up front. The moral is the house of Allah needs to be clean and pristine. Now, the story is, when I first became Muslim, I moved to Houston, and one of my very first teachers is an amazing brother named Imam Zubair. And he was such a good teacher that he held classes throughout the whole city of Houston, y'all. That's the 4th largest city in America. And his classes consistently had hundreds of people. He was incredibly engaging, and because of this popularity and this ability of him to connect with folks, the Islamic Society of Greater Houston, ISGH, placed him at one of the largest mosques in their organization. It was called the Southeast Mosque at the time. And it was a huge property with a very big center. But the problem was, it had fallen into disrepair. It was not maintained properly. So the first thing that Imam Zubair did was he went out and he did a masjid cleanup, which is phenomenal, one of the most common sense things you could do. However, it had an unintended consequence. A couple days after the cleanup, neighbors from around the area just started to randomly pop into the mosque, say hello, and they kept saying the same thing to the imam. They're like, "We are so glad you're here." And after a couple times this happened, the imam asked, he was like, "Do you guys know who I am?" I mean, I would be surprised. And they're like, no, we have no idea who you are. But one gentleman in particular said, "Every time I mow my backyard or look out the window from my home, I used to see this giant mound of trash and just debris in my backyard on your property. And I knew once that was gone, there had to be new management. And I just wanted to say thank you. Welcome to the neighborhood." Guys, the way we present ourselves through our houses of worship is so incredibly important. So things like power washing the exterior, making sure that the bathrooms are pristine, making sure that the walls, the floorboards, everything is clean without scuffs goes a long, long way. So without further ado, do your physical site improvements. Next, guys, one of the coolest things about Ramadan is just the waiting for it. Excitement for Ramadan to come. It's like an old friend that you never get to see, and then all of a sudden they're there. You want to maximize every second you have with them. So that anticipation, looking for Ramadan can be a great activity that can empower yourselves and the community. How? Go to a planetarium, go to an observatory, and have like an overnight or just a late night event with the youth from our community. Planetariums and observatories do this all the time for youth groups. And what is great about that is they get to look through the telescopes, they get to try to sight the moon. We're not going to have any halal wars here, guys. For the non-Muslims, what that means is there's some controversy over sighting the moon each year, and it's a big issue. We won't get into it. However, the best thing about going to a planetarium or an observatory is that the kids have a fantastic time. They get to learn, how to use telescopes. And then for the community overall, most of these institutions are funded by NGOs and government. So when you get to meet those folks, you also get to then become in that circle where you get to rub shoulders with very important people in the community while having a great time for your kids and while keeping alive a tradition on looking for the moon for the start of Ramadan. Then attend school board meetings, y'all. If you're a parent or not, if you're a community leader, it is so important that we have visible Muslim presence at our local school board meetings. And this is primarily because during Ramadan, if there are standardized testing, if there is sporting events and things like that, PE classes, it is incredibly difficult on our kids to do that while they're fasting. So starting now, I mean, not directly now, but after the winter Christmas break, start to see what's going on with the school board calendar. See if you can just show up. And you'll find so many things that you'll want to get involved with. Things from school closures to curriculum updates to on and on and on. You guys would be amazed at the amount of good we can do just by simply showing up and getting involved with the local schools. After that, guys, social studies and religious studies professors. Reach out to your local community college and your local universities. You probably have Muslims teaching there anyway. So starting with Ramadan, what you could do for your masjid is invite the professors and the teachers to the masjid for a tour, Q&A session, Islam 101 presentation. And what normally happens from there is you get lasting relationships. Guys, I did an Islam 101 presentation at the Houston Community College, and I have now a 24-year friendship with a teacher over there named Tina. And the amazing thing with this is that not only do you get to do some outreach, but then they'll often invite you or have requests for presentations from the Muslim community to their students. So student tours come or you become a speaker and you get to actually give people the real Muslim voice when they're learning about us. It's so incredibly powerful. And then train a PR committee. Now, I want to take a second here just to say that if you guys are interested in these ideas, and I have done almost all of these personally, and in the few cases where I haven't, I've worked with teams who were engaged working on these. So I have materials for a lot of these to help support people who may not know how to do it or who have questions. So in the comment section below, put the idea that you like, and then say, would like more information. And if I get enough of that, I'll start to then reach out to each of you individually and send out maybe some primer type materials that'll help you along. Now, training a PR committee. The best thing about this here is that most Islamic centers, most communities do not actively monitor the news or build relationships or understand how they're even viewed by their neighbors. So a PR committee can do all of that, and it'll actually help reduce reaction time and start to get the community to understand how they can do outreach. It's a complex subject, but a PR committee during Ramadan becomes incredibly important because that's when news stations and people have the most curiosity about Muslims. So you want to be prepared. I have some articles I will link in the description below about being prepared for the media during Ramadan. And without further ado, let's go to the next section. Welcoming non-Muslims and especially returning Muslims. Why is this so important, guys? I grew up as a Catholic, and one of the hilarious things that used to happen, I was an altar boy, the whole 9 yards. And I remember we had this like inside joke. It was kind of called the once a year Catholics. They would show up on Christmas Day or on Christmas Eve the night before for Mass, for basically like a Jummah or a church service. And the funny thing was all the regular attendees of the church would always kind of joke about the once a year Catholics, but underneath that joke, y'all, was something I think that exists in the Muslim community too. It's that it was inconvenient all of a sudden. You know, you would normally have your regular commute to church. You would have your parking spots and at least the area in the parking lot that you normally snagged a spot. With this huge influx of people coming in, you had to leave earlier. A lot of times you were late. Parking is a struggle. You know, walking in and out, there's all these new people in the way. And, you know, at the end of the day, one of the things that could be the worst that could happen inside a Muslim community is, let's say someone is curious, they saw a news segment about Ramadan, they just show up, or you know, someone who has maybe some Muslim background in their family but never was religious comes to the mosque and they're not being treated well. We need to build an ethos in our community to welcome visitors as they are. I could tell you horror story after horror story of people interested in Islam, but maybe had a gang background and had facial tattoos or something else. And then they were treated so bad that they left and weren't interested in Islam for years. And then they got the call again and finally kind of overcame it. So let's make our centers welcoming to non-Muslims. Then one of the things that I think actually helps and encourages that is imagine having a door prize system for new visitors. Just kind of like they show up and then they don't leave empty-handed. This is especially important when you have like dignitaries, our guests who come by the mosque. A lot of times at the last minute we scramble, we find some English translation of the Quran that's been sitting on the shelf forever. We try to dust it off and we hand them so they don't leave empty-handed. Or there's like some pamphlets that we haven't even read them. We don't know if the material inside is in good English or whatnot. Imagine having a gift bag with like some attar, cologne or perfume in there, some sweets, and some core reliable books about Islam that you can give your visitors. This is a small thing that goes a tremendous way. Then imagine if we had a committee that monitored the culture of our center, that thought about, do we employ best practices? For instance, if a non-Muslim walks through, if your mosque has a male and female interest instead of just one, comes into the wrong entrance, is there someone there who can actually intercept, diffuse the situation, and do it with grace and show respect to everybody? Do we have, for instance, regular reminders to the people in attendance? Hey guys, the kids are playing around. This is a good thing. We want them happy in the mosque. And then only if they're incredibly noisy or not supervised, then you're actually looking for the parents and you have a good way of working with the situation. A best practice and culture community can make a tremendous impact on the way the entire congregation feels about coming to the masjid, because you're regularly teaching people the behavior that's expected, and then you're encouraging proactive behaviors. One of the coolest things that I saw in a mosque in Texas, in College Station actually, is if they didn't recognize you, if you were a visitor coming through town after, you know, the event or after Jummah prayer, they would literally pull you up in front of the whole congregation, introduce you, and then people would come by and say hello. And it was such a warm and welcoming experience that I think this is the type of thing that as a community during Ramadan especially, we want to consider. Next is to host a neighbor's iftar. One of the craziest things that I've seen, and I had my friends at Islam in Spanish come by to Colorado and do some events for us. And one of the interesting things, they did some role playing where they were a neighbor next to a mosque, who the mosque had been there for years, and the neighbor was questioning, like, what do you guys do in the building? How come I've never met you? Why have you guys never reached out and invited us? And without fail, every person, when they're asked those questions, they don't have good answers most of the time, because really there isn't good answers. We have to be good neighbors. And one of the unique opportunities about Ramadan is that we have meals regularly, and we're in kind of a spirit of giving and of outreach. And it's one of the best ways to invite. Another thing that could happen, let's say your mosque is in a strip center and you're surrounded by businesses or other congregations. Have an iftar for all the people who also are in that center and get to know them and their concerns. And then you would find incredibly empowering things happen. Like, for instance, there might be, you know, some crime in the parking lot you're worried about, and then your voice is amplified when you have multiple tenants of a strip center, of a shopping center, all having the same complaint. And that empowers you when you work with law enforcement or the property owner to do something about it. So building those bridges, incredibly important. Then create a welcoming committee. And guys, if you haven't done this before, go to a black church on a Sunday. Just visit, show up right before service, and see how, especially like an AME church, an African Methodist Episcopal church, these guys are on top of their game when it comes to having friendly faces, welcoming new people, and welcoming regular congregants to their center. They have a giant smile. They're giving out hugs and handshakes. So be careful. You might have to learn how to navigate that in advance. But just see how they're prepared. They talk, they know what to say about the center, its history, their pastor. Sometimes they even have like tips about what the sermon's going to be about today. And most of the time, they know the regular congregants by name, and people just walk into the center feeling seen, feeling heard, and actually being welcomed. During Ramadan, this is incredibly important because we have influx of new people, and also a lot of times, masajid and mosques for non-Muslims watching this are just places of prayer that doesn't have a lot of staff. So people might come in and have never been to a mosque before, and they walk in the door and everyone's praying. There's no one there to welcome them, and they kind of feel lost or intimidated. And then they're like, nobody cared that I showed up. And you just don't want that to happen. And Ramadan's one of the best times to prevent that and establish a new best practice, having a welcoming committee. Then, and this kind of goes without saying, Masjid open houses during Ramadan is one of the best times because, again, it'll be the typical news cycle of what Ramadan is, explaining to people, and that, our holidays are coming up and that Muslims are fasting, and that's happening all around the world. You want to capitalize on that positive attention for our community by holding open houses. Of course, you want to then invite the neighbors, like I said. You also want to be strategic about who you invite, and we'll get into a little bit about that more. But one of the best things about having open houses is it really refutes the idea that we are a closed community or that we have anything to hide. So after that, do outreach to your local library. Y'all, the type of people who go to the library these days are some of the smartest, most open-minded people who are well-read and who are always thirsting for information. If you meet the library management, whether it's the individual library closest to your center or this library system for your city, they might actually, and we've had a lot of success for this in different places, put up across that one library or across the whole system a table on Ramadan, and they would look to you to help put information that is accurate about Islam and Muslims. And then you have, during this month, a chance for anyone just walking in and out of the library who might be curious to see this display, to learn about Islam and Muslims, and that'll help normalize our image and the way we are seen in the community. Very, very powerful. After that, adopting a fire station. Guys, I know of a few mosques that are literally right next door to a fire station, but they have no relationship at all. And one of the tragedies about this is that if you've ever worked with first responders, you know that firefighters in particular have some strong feelings about Islam and Muslims because of September 11th, 2001. A lot of firefighters were the first responders and didn't have the best equipment and had a lot of issues after they responded to those terrorist attacks. But more importantly, though, is that firefighters are the type of folk that just run into a burning building to save people's lives. They don't care what building it is. They don't care who the people inside are. So they're very heroic. And it's one of the easiest ways to be a good neighbor and to care about the civic institutions that protect us. And they have a lot of needs. Certain communities, there's like forest fires every year, and the firefighters are out there. They often have like petitions for socks or for underwear. And then just regularly, when people are at the fire station, they generally stay there for several days at a time on a on-call basis. So they don't have good food and they're away from their homes. And so what a lot of communities do is adopt the firehouse and then provide meals or some other type of support for the people who are putting their lives on hold in order to save our lives. Incredibly powerful and great way to give back to our society. Then do a ride along, y'all. I know this one's not going to be for everyone. And I know in our community, we have mixed feelings about working with law enforcement, and for good reason. So I'm saying for those of you who have a mindset of doing outreach to your local police department, find out if they're doing ride-alongs. A lot of times they won't be because of COVID, and they're still kind of opening that back up. But if they do, one of the best things about doing a ride-along is you get to know your neighborhood in a way that you've never seen before. You also get to know the challenges that the police face, and you get to know a little bit about the types of crime, the types of issues that are happening in your neighborhood that you would have never seen. On top of all of that, though, your center will start to develop a relationship with its closest police department. And one of the hugest benefits about that is Ramadan is often a time when we need extra security, we need extra patrols. And if they know you, it's so much more likely that they're going to do those extra patrols. And if you let the police officers know that, for instance, we're going to have a lot more people parking, and this is because of Ramadan, it's during certain times, you can actually get like the chief to start to tell their officers, guys, be a little bit more lenient on parking tickets per se, give people warnings, let them know that, because the way Ramadan always works is it is kind of starts off as this big rush, and then it kind of contracts a little bit and then becomes a lot more people towards the end of the month. And if you can explain that to your local law enforcement, then sometimes you actually really benefit the community on things like tows and having their car towed and ticketing. And then also, if you have these officers who are working long shifts, make a plate for them. Let them have some delicious food. It builds bridges. It makes people care about you. And then if there ever is an issue, Allah forbid, first responders, like any other human being, are going to be more amicable if they do have to come out to your facility because they know you. It just makes sense. Now, after that, reach out and see if your city, your county has an outdoor or public art department. One of the amazing things about that is that they're always looking for artists. They always are having big projects and plans that are coming up. And this is one of the ways that you can get Muslim artists featured in public art, having a mural, having some kind of tile work, having paintings, having Islamic calligraphy. Being a part of public art projects can be huge. And they may very well not have an issue but they have a deadline of putting up some new art, and you could actually see if Ramadan can be a theme that they would be interested in, or get plugged into other projects that are they have in the pipeline, and even think about having Ramadan art projects in the future. Next item is to get a facility security audit. This is so important, guys, because very often our sites are kind of, like I said earlier, we do most things in our community in a hurry and a volunteer capacity. And we don't always, understand what to think about. And having a trained professional come by and look at your facility, look at the masjid, look at the center from a security angle, from how do you park, how do you drive up, what are the places around that have good visibility and don't have good visibility, where is more lighting needed, what are the entrances like. All of those types of considerations can make this community safer. And a lot of times law enforcement agencies will do them for free. It may not be your local PD, but that's always a really great place to start, because they can point you to other people. Maybe it would be state law enforcement, maybe it would be federal or county, but lots of times they have people who do security for sites. It's called site security, and they can teach you how to harden your site in a way that doesn't make it less approachable or less enjoyable. And the biggest benefit here is that there's federal and often state funds for improving house of worship security. And most of the time, in order to get the grant that those have, you have to have a well done and professional security audit. So this will kind of help you smell two flowers with one whiff. Then think about if you have events that are planned in Ramadan that are kind of key, really popular events in the community, and figure out if that can fit into the news cycle. I can give you guys resources for how to draft press releases, how to pitch stories, but you want media coverage for the positive things that Muslims are doing as much as possible, especially now that we have a new administration that has a strong kind of xenophobic tint in their messaging. We want to normalize the American Muslim community in people's minds as much as possible. And this is one of the best opportunities. Having, let's say your mosque does a Feed the Hungry program during Ramadan. having the media come out and show the meals being packed and then being distributed can be a tremendous boost to your local community's image and also highlight the good work that you actually do. And speaking of that, one of the most amazing things that I saw, this was from a Presbyterian church in Houston, Texas. For every dollar they raised, they had a 1-for-1 charity donation. Now, I'm not saying we should go that far, but imagine during Ramadan when you're fundraising for the iftar meals, if you had a 1-for-1, if you're one of the wealthier congregations that can afford this, for every meal that you feed someone who's fasting, you provide a meal to the food bank of your city or to a shelter where unhoused people are. Doing something like this, it could be 2-for-1 or it could be 1-for-2, however you want to do it, but having a consistent giving back to society and fighting hunger in our community. Guys, you don't understand how pervasive hunger in America is. People look like they're doing great, but they're going home to empty refrigerators, empty pantries, and can be a great way for our community to get empowered and make a massive positive impact in the lives of others. Then, if you can't do that, here's a great idea. We often have food catered, and then what happens is there's leftover food and it just gets thrown out. So having a connection with, and these have sprung up everywhere in major metropolitans and even in some small towns, they're called food rescue nonprofits. And what they do is, like for weddings or events, they will go and um, basically collect any food that's not eaten, package it, preserve it, or immediately distribute it to people so that hungry people don't go without and the food doesn't go to waste. Now, you should do this early to make sure that the leftover food from an iftar will meet their guidelines and can be redistributed. But this is one of the options, especially if you can't do the 1-for-1 meal option, where we can make a positive impact for folks. Then, speaking of food, have a meeting with your neighborhood supermarket. Go out there, talk to the manager, say, hey, Ramadan's coming in a couple of months, and we've seen that you do Passover, we've seen that you do Christian celebrations and do displays and do discounts on products for these seasons. We would like the same for ours. And I did this, y'all, about 24 years ago when I worked at Kroger's as a pharmacy tech. I was on the store's diversity committee. And just by letting them know that Ramadan was coming, they put up tables at both of the major entrances into the store that had a "What is Ramadan" presentation on a bulletin board, and then it had featured food like dates and other food. The store also had some limited halal meat options, and they even went as far as to give discounts on some of the products that were associated with Ramadan and Muslim foods. So this can be in a tremendously empowered way for your community to approach it. Also, this allows you, for instance, if your grocery store has like a loyalty program and that also doubles down as a charity. A lot of schools do this where when they check out, they scan the card, a percentage of the order goes to benefit the school. You can set that up for your mosque as well. Then this kind of goes back to the idea of open houses, but doing outreach to leadership and community groups. This is incredibly important. This is more of like a targeted open house or a targeted relationship building effort. In Nashville, a very good friend of mine named Rashid, he has done for years an Islam 101 presentation for Leadership Nashville and for Leadership Tennessee. And what's beautiful about that is that these classes, these groups who are learning about civics, who are learning about being future leaders of their community, are learning about their local Muslim community. And each Muslim community across the nation has its own unique flavors. So, for instance, in Nashville, it has one of the largest Kurdish populations anywhere in the world, not just anywhere in America. And so they get to learn about the Kurdish community, about different specific issues that people face in Nashville and in Tennessee. And it is incredibly empowering. And if you don't have like a leadership organization in your town, you could look at groups like the Rotary Club or other organizations that make impacts and then start to build relationships that way. And again, civic empowerment comes through relationship building, and you want to use Ramadan as much as you can to capitalize on those opportunities. And speaking of that, if there is a powerful, well managed uh, nonprofit in your area that is providing a really outstanding service, why not have not just your own center's main fundraiser for the year, but do like a small, maybe middle of Ramadan benefit fundraiser for that organization? For instance, in Houston, one of the centers I used to work at when I was the executive director of the Islamic Society of Greater Houston was a group called Dress for Success. I know many of you have heard of them. They provide professional clothes, interview training, skill acquisition to women who might have some difficult backgrounds that they're overcoming. And one of the things that when you finish like the interview prep courses, you get a brand new outfit, which is great for going to interviews. And so imagine having a iftar dinner to sponsor Dress for Success and have the Muslim community fund a number of those um, initiatives so that people then are seeing our community make an impact for some of the most vulnerable people in society. Another thing is to do a fasting challenge. Now, your local MSA is probably all over this because there is the fastathon. And I would actually, as a Muslim center, either contact the MSA, offer to empower them with some sort of support, or have them host one of the fasting challenges at your center. One of the beautiful things about this, though, is you can get really creative with it. You can have, for instance, your local elected officials fast on a particular day with you, and then you can pair them up with somebody to help them learn how to, have the pre-fast meal and how to break the fast, have the fast. And at the mosque or the community center with the community, and then they get to talk about their experience. People get to build bridges, and you get to really build that relationship with your local elected official. It's a great way to empower your community. After that, think about having themed iftar dinners. And this can be, for instance, I think the most obvious one right now is to combat the genocide. So to have maybe one themed dinner about Palestinian food and have the iftar be Palestinian cuisine. Have another one about maybe Palestinian culture and have art exhibits and other cultural displays available during the iftar. And then having maybe a themed iftar about donating to organizations on the ground feeding hungry people in Gaza. And that way you're doing something to counteract the genocide. Another way to take the iftar and the Ramadan motif to another level is to do an iftar at the capital or at your local city hall if you're not in the capital city of your state. This actually then brings the mayor out, brings out potentially your governor, brings out city council members or legislators from the state level, and gets you guys to be able to build relationships with them. Also gets them to enjoy delicious Muslim cultural food, and is a fantastic event. In Houston, where I'm from, there's been an initiative from the mayor's office and several large organizations putting these on for years, and it becomes sometimes one of the biggest events of the year was to have what they would call over there the mayor's iftar. And then in Nashville, an interfaith organization took it upon themselves to do the Music City iftar. All of these events were incredibly empowering and facilitated relationships that otherwise would not have happened. Another thing to do is host your local communities. So what I mean by that is, like here in Aurora, where I live, there are very large Ethiopian and Eritrean communities, and most of the ones that live here tend to be Christian. And there's also a very large Korean community. So one of the things that our community could do is have a iftar or a visit themed around people and large ethnic communities around us. But it doesn't have to be that way. It could also be any other type of community that you see. So having these themed hosting communities for an iftar dinner or an outreach event at your masjid can be incredibly powerful. Another thing to do is item collection. So like it could be for the next school year, you could put out a list of find out from your local school district what kids have the most need for in the beginning of the year, or if there's supplies that halfway through the year that schools need. You could reach out just to a local school as well, but do an item collection where everyone who comes that day or for that week is bringing, like canned food to give to a pantry or any other type of item collection. One of the best, especially when Ramadan is in the winter, can be sanitation kits and blanket and clothing drives for unhoused people. Again, incredibly powerful, and it also connects you with groups that help those people on the ground and put your community into a service mindset. And that's where I was actually going to doing an iftar for unhoused people. This could be at a park that has a close proximity to where maybe there's encampments of people, or it could be at your center, or it could be in combination with other mosques and a nonprofit that works on people experiencing homelessness. And this way, it could be either a benefit dinner, an awareness dinner, or even just a feed unhoused people iftar. But these are all fantastic ideas on how to make an impact and how to empower Muslims. Then an interfaith iftar, but not, there's a twist. Don't do it at your masjid. Find out a local congregation that would host you to feed a portion of their community, and you bring your congregants, and they'll normally have a banquet hall, and you can set up a program where there's some quick speeches, quick Q&A sessions. People get to learn about each other, and the congregations get to mix and meet one another. This works particularly well when there's like two churches or a church and a mosque right next to each other, and it helps break the ice, helps make people learn more about one another. Then after that, I have kind of the final one. Do a proclamation and start these early, y'all. Proclamations often take time. You can find lots of really well-written proclamations online that other people have done in the past, and you can update and edit that language and make it specific to your community. One of the best things about doing proclamations, though, is that it is an official government document and it is on the record. So what I do when I write proclamations is I put all of the facts about the Muslim community where I live into the proclamation, because then the mayor or the governor reads that out, and people will hear things like the Muslim community of Denver is uh, full of small business owners who positively contribute to the economy. Um, and that'll become one of the talking points that's not only read during the city council meeting, but also is in official government documents for prosperity. And on top of all of that, when you do these proclamations, they normally give them to you during a council meeting. And so you'll have a delegation from the Muslim community there to receive it. And then you get to meet other council members, you get to meet the mayor or the governor and other legislators. And one of the coolest things about doing it that way is that you can request that the opening prayer for that session be done by an imam or by a Muslim. And then for maybe that's never happened in your locality before, but everyone there gets to hear how Muslims pray, gets to hear the Quran, gets to hear the translation of the Quran, and gets to see us as engaging and working with the system to make our society better. So, guys, I hope that this has been something that you value. And I just wanted to say thank you all for spending this time with me. I hope that the rest of your day is fantastic. And I pray that God bless you and all your loved ones.